I'm going to talk about both my experience with clients and as well as Quintin's experience with his being both a system admin role within his prior employer, and then more importantly, he currently works at BlackLine. He actually conducted a huge seminar during the In the Black conference, and so we're highlighting that because it was literally a standing room only event at In the Black. So for those of you who have not attended In the Black conference, it was by far one of the better conferences out there. And more importantly, it actually highlighted some great sessions on best practices and advanced tips and tricks. So with that, I'm going to move forward on our agenda and some housekeeping items. The first of which is there's going to be a Q&A box coming up, but more importantly, answer some of the polling questions. And if you can, complete the feedback form. We're trying to figure out the best use of our time going forward with BlackLine best practice modules and templates, etc. And there is going to be a Q&A box. It should be at the bottom right for you guys to leverage. And also, if you raise your hand, sometimes what I'll do is I'll look through it and then approve it, and then you can kind of chat with me that way as well. Here are some of the agenda items for the roles. We're going to talk about local admin roles, business admin roles, and system admin roles. But more importantly, one of the outcomes that we were trying to achieve based on conversations before this webinar was to really get in deeper in terms of some cheat sheets that you can go back to work and leverage. And I'll share an Excel template that may be something useful for all of you. You know, when you go back to work, it's a template that we now. Quintin, is that you? I think, yeah, there we go. I heard. There we go. We got your mic on. All right. The first polling question, and it's going to pop up right now, is we want to get to know who you are. I'm going to open it up right now and tell us a little bit about your role in the organization. Are you a local business or system admin? Are you a process owner, prepare reviewer, or are you, an IT or auditor within the organization? So again, if we can get you to answer the polling questions, we're going to leave it up for one more second. Okay, great. I'm going to end it and publish it. It looks like a lot of you are in the bucket of system, business, and admin roles. There's only, I'll end it now. And so 62% are system, 4% are business, and 12% are local admin roles, and then the rest of you make up the preparers and reviewers and auditor or IT other folks, which is good because we're actually going to go slide by slide based on each of these admin roles, some of the best practices we've seen, and then some tips and tricks for obviously those people in the IT audit role and some process owners as well. So let me get that going out of here, and we'll move forward to a very famous quote offered up by a very famous president, John F. Kennedy. And the source of this quote, which you can read here, is not taking action on something that should be taken action costs more, and the risks do elevate higher than normal when you don't take action. In other words, when there's a fire that should be put out, you should be taking action to put the fire out. It's better to take some action versus inaction. And I'm going to cover some of the local admin best practices, and I'm going to turn it over to Quintin to talk about some business and system admin best practices, which are very strategic in nature. So let's get into some of the local admin best practices. So this is your hit list of 5. We're going to talk about due dates, meaning get the team to agree and enforce what is either part of a policy, part of a culture, part of a risk assessment to get those due dates and comply with those due dates. The other is making sure when you're grouping something when it comes to account balances, it makes sense. And it keeps up with accounting policies and accounting treatment, but more importantly, it's eliminating unnecessary risk as well. The other is being consistent with users. So as you develop a culture with BlackLine, it is its own unique system, right? And you want to make users comfortable very easily and faster. And we're going to drill in on using BlackLine Teams as a local admin, and then more importantly, really encourage account rules assignments. So let's get into due dates. Getting the recs done on time is of top priority, right? It's one of the main drivers of why you even purchase BlackLine. And for those administrators with reconciliations to certify, you really have to also lead by example, okay? So going down on folks that haven't, let's say, been as diligent in terms of due dates, you need to lead the charge and show by example how you are keeping up with your own due dates. There is a report. I hope some of you have some notes, that you're taking down. This deck might be available on our slide share in 2 weeks, but to take something back with you today, there is a report. It's called a certification log report. It's going to be in your quality reports folder, and there's a subfolder that's called certification log reports, and within it you can start seeing how due dates are being applied and actually making sure that folks are abiding by what they agreed to. Now, wanted to move on to a question that most of you guys have about time off, right? Is it a pretty good excuse to say, well, so-and-so was on vacation, they missed this, etc.? Actually, it's not really a good excuse. Most people have data that they can work with to get high-risk accounts and recs done. It's about preparing their time and their schedule accordingly, and more importantly, a local admin can work with teams and making sure that you create the appropriate team. So PTO really isn't a great excuse to not getting things done. Quintin, I wanted to ask you, oops, he just came off. Let me get him in. Quintin, I wanted to ask you, I just enabled your microphone, about alerts. So alerts help remind users in various roles. For example, what's coming due, there's the warning alerts, there's what's already past due, which are delinquent alerts, and then the outstanding items requiring action, those are the pending alerts. And then, or there's like the status of an item, meaning it's a status alert. So business and system administrators are able to manage those alerts, okay? But local administrators only have access to the alert status page. So what have you seen work well for local admins to inform the business and system admins to maybe start changing or editing those alerts when it is actually appropriate? Okay, so we're having an audio issue with Quintin, and basically the response that it comes to communication and open lines of communication with the local admins to the system administrators. In other words, if there are certain priorities that are taking hold for the organization, then that might be sufficient to work with the business and system admins to change those due dates and those alerts. Now I wanted to talk about an item that is near and dear to the auditors in the audience, which is enforcing account groupings and the integrity of those groupings. So the groups occur because of an accounting process. There's a GL string, etc., like a certain prepaid set of accounts, etc. But for preparers and reviewer or preparers and approvers, doing the right account groupings gives them the capabilities of doing less clicks and being way more efficient in the reconciliation process. Before you start with groups, make sure that you are developing and publishing the expectations of what is a good group requirement. Now, for local admins, they usually conduct the grouping of accounts, and a quick set of advanced best practices when it comes to grouping is to figure out what actually should not be done. For example, you should never really group cash accounts. And what's the Y factor? The Y factor there is bank accounts have their own bank statements. Okay, so you could be commingling cash if you say this these series of cash accounts, even though it's with the same bank. Okay, grouping that would not be an ideal best practice in terms of grouping. The other would be, in terms of what to avoid in grouping, would be certain asset accounts to be grouped with, let's say, a contra asset account or a liability account. This is going back to the basics of accounting. So even though, let's say, the allowance for doubtful account is a contra asset account, it's going to have a different balance. It's a judgment. So I would not group that with my AR reconciliation grouping because I want it to be separate. Now, I wanted to talk through the developing of a new user onboarding process. So HR has a process, and they kind of tick and tie the federal and state regulatory requirements. Sometimes it's international requirements, etc. But being consistent of what is allowed to be done when you get someone on board, and more importantly, getting them access to resources to make them as successful as possible is actually one of the best building blocks of getting them on board. And HR, unfortunately, cannot be everything to everyone. And I'll share with you a quick template that you might find interesting, and more importantly, you may want to use in your own environment. One best practice that I have heard from users, we actually host a face-to-face meeting with users, and we go through advanced tips and tricks. But after a meeting, we were talking to a system admin, and we found out that this hospital actually does have a standardized introductory email based on a preparer role, reviewer role, a manager role, etc. And in it, they just blast this off, and they actually have attachments, and they actually reference internal company policies and procedures. Now, what they've done is they put it in a Word document, so that way, when a role is created for, let's say, a new employee, the admin role isn't trying to figure out what to send out, right? They've already had an advanced email set. The other is to leverage BlackLine University. In it, it's got a ton of great tips and tricks. You can ask questions to other group folks. The other is creating a peer-to-peer checklist. So this is local admins, obviously depending on the size of the company you have, local business and system admins getting together, let's say on a quarterly basis, and coming up with a checklist on sharing knowledge of what should be done when you create new profiles and getting new team members on board. Now, I wanted to go to our second polling question, which is, what resources are you using when you have questions about BlackLine? Where are you trying to get the answers from? I'll open up the question here. So are you going to your friends, coworkers, meaning these are people at your level? Are you going to BlackLine resources, meaning BlackLine University, the BlackLine community? Are you going to online free videos, YouTube? Are you going to LinkedIn on some of the user groups that are out there? Or are you going to your boss, So I'm going to leave it open just for 30 seconds more. And Quintin, the audio, it doesn't look like there's a setup audio yet for you. It's got to be a computer audio. So let me know if you've got that available. All right, I'm going to end the poll and publish the results. Overwhelmingly, which is, I think it's a great thing, 75% of you are using BlackLine resources. It's definitely one of the best of breed that I've seen when it comes to certain applications. Some of you are using some videos, and then others are going to coworkers, etc. Maybe there's a fear of the boss or manager because that wasn't used at all, or LinkedIn. Let me hide that. All right, here's the template that I was mentioning earlier, which is a consistent onboarding process. So above this, I hid the rows above this, but you'll see the BlackLine setup here in this checklist. So it talks about the name of the person, their ID number, their phone extension, title, blah, blah, blah. What's most important here is the starting of the process to really think through, did the manager of this employee really approve on the role, okay, in BlackLine? Single sign-on hopefully is not an issue. It's been tested. You've got that intro email, right, that template that we were talking about earlier done. Think about BlackLine buddy or peer that they would want to know in that email in case they had a question that they can leverage a person within the company. And then the other is you'll see the prepare and review or account rec setup, right? So here are some items that you may want to consider in your onboarding checklist. Does this person need the purpose of an account rec process? Do you need to reference a certain policy for them in particular, or at least a folder? Is there a how-to for the reconciliation, meaning a flow chart? You might find this in your Sarbanes-Oxley or your narratives or your flow charts, etc. The scope of the individuals and reconciliations within the organization. In other words, do they understand the scope of the work, the number of other folks within the same boat that are doing the same recs, preparing and reviewing? Due dates, do they understand and comprehend what they're responsible for? Do they know where the repository of information and policies and procedures are? Do they know the escalation guidelines to best contact? So maybe it's not the local admin, it's really a system admin thing that they need to evaluate when they come across, let's say, a major problem like decertification, etc. So those sorts of things are examples that you can leverage, and we'll share it on our website for you to download for free, and we'll share with you where it's located towards the end of the webinar. Now, I wanted to talk about encouraging team usage. Earlier, I mentioned about due dates and personal time off. We get that question a lot. Well, it's okay, so-and-so was on vacation. Well, if you create teams, you're actually going to increase the accountability, and the due dates are going to be in compliance with what the team has agreed to. The other part is teams, when you set it up, well, the managers to those teams or department heads, once you set up those teams correctly, they can actually put out other fires that happen to come, into the finance and accounting department without having to worry about the day-to-day, month-to-month stuff dropping. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the various hyperlinks within BlackLine, I'm sharing in this picture in yellow the area where you can toggle in order to switch in between your own individual assignments and compared to, let's say, the team assignments. So it's right there if you guys have ever wondered where those team assignments for local admins is. I wanted to get into about encouraging account rules-based assignments. Now, here's a picture where you can start seeing where the company had made a decision that a certain dollar threshold, when it comes to U.S. entities, something was going to happen. In other words, there's an automated risk ranking, high risk ranking. And then there was a threshold as well for foreign entities. And then there are some other thresholds related to, long-term assets and other due dates for high-risk accounts, etc. This is really just to let you know that you got to get the system to work for you. You have to work with your system administrator to really make this happen. So I wanted to go ahead.
Hi everyone. Sonia, thanks for your patience. I was trying to figure out my audio here. But what this functionality can do is it can really free up some time for the local administrators as they, learn more about BlackLine and, become more of a subject matter expert. And this, like Sonia is indicating, does allow the functionality to do some of the manual work. Examples here of many of our organizations that use BlackLine, when a certain reconciliation balance is over a threshold, let's say $100,000, they want that reconciliation to be labeled a key account for extra visibility. And these account-based rules can, adjust to that and actually do that labeling automatically. Another example is, let's say there's one individual in the company who reconciles goodwill or paid in capital. You can identify those type of GL accounts, and when a new reconciliation is created, BlackLine will automatically assign it to that individual. So lots of opportunities here. So thanks.
Yeah, it's this is just a sample list, but we've actually seen this list much longer. Okay, because the team on a semi-annual basis starts reviewing this and figures out what could be improved upon in terms of making the system work for them. And we'll get into some of the semi-annual activities that you might want to consider. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Quintin, who has over 8 years of experience. He was actually the business admin role at his previous company. And Quintin is going to tell us about some of the best practice items for some of the business admin roles. And we're going to list them here one by one.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. When I think about the business administrator role, I really think about that higher level individual in accounting and finance who can really leverage the different financial systems and have them interact with BlackLine, plus be the steward to make sure that the functionality pairs with the policies, pairs with the the reconcilers and their processes. So we have a few thoughts here. One is a quarterly quality assurance program. Two, publish monthly trend reports. Then third, really identifying for leadership, how we're doing with the account reconciliation certification status updates. Four, a quarterly newsletter. And then five, lots of functionality within BlackLine that I think sometimes isn't leveraged enough is the ability to do special accounting principle reviews. And, these are the things that I think can make a strong impact on the accounting processes, which leads to a holistically stronger financial reporting process. So we'll, over the next pages, I'll probably lead to dive into this. Sonia, does that sound good as the next steps here for this stage of the event?
Yeah, absolutely. I like this hit list. I think a lot of people, when they walk away from this webinar, are going to think through what's because every company has a different culture. So maybe something quarterly might not work out, but semi-annual, or it's a brand new implementation. They really want to do it monthly just to make sure the first year is a great year of kickoff in terms of the implementation. But this is a great segue in terms of what a quality assurance program should look like.
Sure. So, part of that quality assurance program, there's evaluation functionality in BlackLine. you can actually create your own evaluations. When reconciliations are completed within the system, you can grade the reconciliations. Then after the evaluations are completed, there's reporting for the evaluations. So within the system functionality, it enables these quality assurance reviews. Suggested topics include simply, was the reconciliation done on time? Many organizations have a SOX control, a management control due date, but then they also have an operational due date, which is a little bit different sometimes, and you can separate them out on that. Are all the supporting documents attached at the correct spot within a reconciliation? All of our templates have different opportunities to attach support. Where is it more appropriate to attach the support? And what that does is that leads to a more efficient approval, and then if so, a more efficient audit downstreams. Are the templates leveraged correctly within BlackLine? Are the prepaid amortization balance sheet accounts using the prepaid amortization template? There's lots of efficiency with our templates. Are our reconcilers leveraging that efficiency? The purpose and procedures, it's really important to get that institutional knowledge into BlackLine, because BlackLine can be that central point for that. And are the reconcilers ensuring that the purpose and procedures are captured? Then further, are required adjustments identified, and if so, are they managed actively from that perspective? At United Health Group, we had testing. We actually failed up to 50% of our QA testing the first couple quarters. But then as we identified execution gaps, we were able to instill policies and procedures and training to close those execution gaps. And then at the end, we were well over 90% passing. So lots of opportunities here. I would encourage you folks to consider this. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great story that, not everybody gets it 100%, right? And everybody is willing to work as a team to get to the finish line and get that done. And in terms of the correct template choice, we actually had a meeting. It was an account rec advanced meeting for existing BlackLine users. And a takeaway for the entire group was, work as a team to figure out what the correct template choice, because different folks had different strategies. And one strategy was let the team lead, work with various owners, and then make a final determination on the template. But the takeaway from the group was hearing from other people that had a committee for the templates seemed to work out best. And I don't think it's a big surprise. I mean, one reason why it was a better success story to the group members there was you get better buy-in, right? Number one. Number two, not everybody sees the reconciliation process the same way. So you're getting different perspectives of how the templates could be used in different scenarios. And more importantly, when you get the team to agree, sometimes it's like, let's say 50% don't want a certain template, but the others want a different template. You can try things out. So nothing's truly set in stone, but when you get the team environment involved, it allows you a higher probability of success and buy-in and a faster process to get adopted.
Agreed. An additional thing that I like the business administrators to really focus on is, evidencing all the work that the reconcilers are doing within the organization. The best way to do that is to, identify metrics for all the processes, publish those metrics within some type of report that's submitted to all the controller level and to the leadership level. Key metrics: number of reconciliations performed, number of active licenses used within BlackLine, percentage of reconciliations done on time, number of required adjustments within the reconciliations, and how many of those required adjustments are greater than 90 days, or whatever day that your management is interested in. Number of timed items, are there timed items greater than 90 days? Now you can do a special project and see, are they truly timing items where you would expect a system entry to clear, or should they actually be classified as a different, reconciling item? Number of account groups. That's where, folks are, considering how an efficient way to do a manual certification, and the grouping can support that. And then, like we talked about with the purpose and procedures, what percentage of the reconciliations have, either empty purpose and procedure boxes where we know there has some work to be done, and so forth. When we start publishing these, this makes the process very efficient, because management is really always interested in monthly reporting, and we can bring that account reconciliation process into a higher status within the team leaders and leadership with this type of trend reporting. So I would encourage that. Sonia, any thoughts from you on this topic?
Yeah, I would say that management teams love to have some metrics of progress. So telling them that you went through the different phases of an implementation project, which is, the planning stage, the beta, you're testing things in a sandbox environment, then user acceptance testing. Okay, that's just the initial stages, but some of these trend reports give them other viable information on that ROI that they were hoping to get out of the system. So, for example, we hear a lot about that due dates get completed on time, the close actually gets done faster, so that's one key metric. But these other trends like timing differences, et cetera, and doing a root cause analysis, maybe it's data in the ERP package, or other areas within the account rec process that really needs to be addressed, because then it gets down to the team environment to really start moving towards an automated and continuous accounting approach, where some of the other metrics I've seen are geared towards, let's say, executives and board level. Some of the lists here really relate to process owners and some of the team members to consider, because after all, they want to see progress too, and don't be afraid to actually have little games and or I would say reward system if certain metrics are met. We've seen that as a best practice as well, in order to get the team to actually move into a certain direction.
So the third topic, within this section, just make sure that, the business administrator role is the steward for timely certification. If the due date was yesterday, the first thing I recommend as a business administrator, come in the morning, and publish, the flash report for how the folks are doing for certifications, not only to leadership, but also to, those folks that aren't completed yet. Make sure they understand that it's really important to meet that timeliness attribute of the account reconciliation. From a quantitative, perspective, BlackLine is one of the few financial services products that can give you that window into how people are doing in real time. So try and leverage that. What that's going to do is it's going to keep BlackLine in the forefront of individuals' daily processes, and that's going to ensure a higher level of due date certification compliance, as the program moves forward, especially if there's many other competing priorities. BlackLine's always going to be that squeaky wheel, and as a business administrator, you can help facilitate that and ensure that the program that you're leading, has a high rate of compliance. Good day. we're talking about a lot of different topics here. We talk about training topics. We're talking about, process. We're talking about different financial systems. A great way to, give voice to all of these different topics is a quarterly newsletter, tips and tricks, frequently asked questions. Sonia had a process about, user onboarding. We can have announcements, lots of different opportunities when you have multiple people using BlackLine in a variety of ways. A quarterly newsletter is a good way for business administrators to create that repository of information, and now you're going to have a canon of information that users can refer back to, and it makes for a very powerful program, which when that all is built, it's going to really help provide long-term quality for the organization. So I'd really have you do that as a business administrator. It could be an email with 3 or 4 topics that would take maybe an hour to write. It could be more formal. I know my quarterly newsletter, I actually sent it out in HTML, and then I had a website with a BlackLine account reconciliation specific products where I had the tags to each one of my newsletters out there. So depending on your organization, depending on where everyone is at with their processes, just looking to just keep the lines of communication open from your program leadership to all the users. Sonia, anything to add on that?
Yeah, well, actually, Aviva Spectrum is actually in the process of coming up with its own newsletter, and it's going to cover some of the. There's going to be 3 categories, but one of the categories, just to share, is some of the advanced features. Okay, so we'll pick either a module or, in this case, right now we're going through system admin roles, but we're also going to highlight some of the new features just to make sure people are in the know of what else can be done because, let's say, a new feature has been added or some adjustments have been done to the software, because it does change, and we definitely are busy in our day. So be on the lookout for a newsletter coming from us, and we'll tell you the LinkedIn group where we're going to make that announcement of this newsletter for folks that are obviously on this webinar and also members of the LinkedIn group.
It's exciting. I can't wait to read it. Yeah, one of the things that, on the surface, you wouldn't expect a reconciliation program to do is really have a positive impact on accounting principles. Behind the scenes in BlackLine, we have lots of reports that you can pull, which actually gives insights into the accounting processes, such as we have a report for abnormal balances. You can see which asset accounts have a credit balance in them. When you strip away the allowance accounts, now you can see if some folks are booking their entries backwards. In some cases, that's especially true if you think about a liability account, maybe with a debit balance. Lots of different ways to pull reporting out of BlackLine in order to look at the quarterly, accounting principles. Stale balances is another one. Why aren't balances changing, maybe over a 6-month period? When we start to, define components of a GL balance, we have many times L items or T items that are aged. And so you could run a report of your L or T items for a certain range of accounts. Let's say you look at account range of miscellaneous receivables that are over 5 months old. You could look at all of the different types of receivables, and you can start to question, why do we have receivables in a miscellaneous account that's over 5 months old? And BlackLine's going to give you some insights, but it's also going to allow you the avenue to go back and question some of that. When I was a manager, I had interns, I had new employees. These accounting principle topics, they were really powerful as far as training tools for newer employees, but they really had a significant impact to the overall financial reporting process. So I encourage you to look at some of these required adjustments, stale balances, different things like that we talked about. And then that's a really nice topic for a monthly newsletter, a quarterly newsletter. And so, at this point, I think we're going to have Sonia sort of, engage with, what her and her teams are doing from the system administrator perspective, considering they're working during implementation and post implementation with a lot of the system administrator folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Quintin. During the implementation process, we get a lot of questions of, what can I expect the first year, the second year, et cetera. And I wanted to make sure that when we're talking about automation and the system admin roles, that the data feed automation doesn't just go to the trial balance, but think through above and beyond automating the trial balance or the GL balance being uploaded automatically. Think about those subledger balances. Think about those, spot exchange rates. Think about those forecasted balances that, especially if you bought the variance module, you may as well use it and use those forecasted balances, as well as, transactions for data sources for matching. It almost pains me when I hear a BlackLine client who just purchases the account rec and tasks module, but then doesn't buy matching. And the reason where the pain is coming from is there's a lot of volume. There's just a lot of data out there, banking data, credit card, POS. I just don't know one business that doesn't deal with a lot of credit card or banking data in general. So those are things to think through about, automating certain functions within BlackLine, especially in the upload process. Now, I'm going to go through each of these about data feed, promoting auto certification rules, encourage custom account reconciliation certification frequencies, and developing a consistent new user onboarding process, which we already discussed a little bit earlier, but this deals with more system admin role or admin roles, and then looking for BlackLine updates. So when we talk about leading the ongoing data feed, now most organizations should think through the import schedule. So is it each day, and what are you currently taking in? Is it the current reconciliation month as well as the current period? Is that automatically being fed? So you need to think through the policy and what makes sense for an organization. Now, in terms of working with management and the schedule, in terms of an upgrade project, for those of you who we spoke with, some of you are currently manually importing trial balances right now. And the process of automating that process of getting the GL balance as well as other projects is actually not that significant in terms of man hours. So I just wanted to give you perspective here because it's one of the most common questions we get is how long will an automation upgrade project be? Or sometimes people will phrase it, how many IT hours versus total hours should I expect when I want to automate my GL feed? So think through the IT hours should be around 5 to 10 hours, but the finance team is just validating the data, right? The completeness and the accuracy and the timing of it, et cetera. And their hours is about 2. So just that alone, just to set that up and forget about it because it's been automated is a huge time saver for folks that that feel like they're clicking and importing data. It's really kind of a wasted time, and the savings in terms of time within the first year, you recoup that. There is a true ROI on that. See where items can be imported in a reconciliation template. So most of you who saw the demo of the product, there were certain hyperlinks where you could import things. Asking other users what they're doing to import certain reconciliation items, it could be supporting items, etc. That might be another way for you to create your hit list of what to automate in the future. And then looking where there's opportunities, like I already mentioned about your subledger balances, to automate that data feed. forward button is getting stuck here. Great. Now, Quintin, do you want to share a little bit about auto certification rules and some of the usage?
Right. So, as the BlackLine product folks, they continue to offer new functionality. And it's going to be up to the administrators to, embrace that. A good example is that is we've always had auto certification rules. And, every year or so they add a new auto certification rule. But in the last couple quarters, what they did, is not only do they have the auto certification rules, but now you can decide how many months that you for each type of account that you can have those rules turn on, and then after that point that the administrator defines, you can require a manual certification. So the combination of the rules plus the length that you want them to run for specific reconciliations creates a really powerful, platform from which administrators can lead even more advanced efficiency perspective. And so what we're recommending is really, take time to do a semi-annual auto certification review where you're looking at which rules you are using, which rules you potentially can be using that are applicable, and then engage with your accounting and financial reporting leaders to see which ones they want to work on. And so that's gonna what it does is it frees up your reconcilers from doing manual certifications to where now the system is doing system certifications. If you can increase your auto certification percentage, maybe 2 or 3 points, per quarter or every 6 months. That's a tremendous efficiency gain when you're assuming that it takes, 10 to 20 minutes per reconciliation to prepare it and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes at a minimum to approve it. You as an administrator can really help, turn those folks' time and energy from reconciliations into even more value added processes. And so, that's what I would encourage you within this topic is to continue to engage on that. And then in the trend reporting, you can actually capture that metric and sort of promote how the efficiency is moving up within your organization. So it's pretty exciting, but that's, one example of auto certifications and how administrators can manage that.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier, Quintin, you and I, about some of the ultimate best practices for certain rules is really just to think through, does it make sense? So an example would be, there's no GL balance, or it's a ZBA account, or there's no movement. Now, you may want to review the entire year's total activity just to see if it's logical, right? It's reasonable that there was no movement in terms of the GL balance. And some other practical examples from this slide is, yes, it's good to develop a semi-annual auto certification review and some of these metrics that we're talking about in the trend reports, but there should be maybe a more frequent review if you just either sold off an entity or you purchased another entity, merged into another one. So for a system admin role, this is kind of like when things are vanilla, there's no major activities, but when there are certain high transaction type of activities or a new business line, etc., then you may want to review this on a more frequent basis until you get to that point where you feel like you've plateaued in terms of the business.
So we're just going to continue on this because it really promotes a lot of power from the organization. And Sonia had a topic here. In our previous business administrator section, we talked about how we can look at stale balances or stale components to make sure that they're not being forgotten and they're continued to be refreshed. We have auto certification rules, such as one is, if, like Sonia just indicated, if an account has a balance but no GL activity, you can actually decide as an organization how many months in a row you would like BlackLine to auto certify that balance. but then after that duration has ended, you can require the manual certification. So a combination of business admin strategies with this system admin strategy, leveraging the different phases of auto certifications, increases the control, increases the financial reporting strength, but also provides the efficiency here. So we just wanted to just make sure that that is reinforced within these two slides.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Just to give everybody a heads up, I know technically we're supposed to stop at 11:30. We're going to go a little bit over, about 5 to 8 minutes over, just to give everybody a heads up on the timeline. I wanted to talk about developing a consistent new user onboarding process. I already alluded to you about the just prepare a reviewer role, but think through what your company should be doing for the system admin roles in terms of what they probably need to have similarly in that checklist. So your first, your role is the first step in the user provisioning process. But even before the local administrator onboarding process starts, the system admin needs to have an established new user onboarding process. So for those of you who haven't developed this, I'm telling you, it's a huge time saver because, sometimes you're not aware of a new person getting hired or a change. Maybe they left the accounting department and they moved into a different department. And really the first steps to begin like a holistic process to culminate a great user base is really think through the why, the how, the when, and the where of BlackLine for these new users. And for those of you, when we were talking through about the resources out there, check out the trust.blackline.com when it comes to the new system information, as well as the community for the new users. And understand how the BlackLine customer service department can help your users as well. So you saw on the checklist for prepare and review a role, there's an escalation policy that was on that checklist. And that's really to get them to understand when is it, when does that particular user need to actually escalate to, let's say, someone within the team versus, let's say, BlackLine customer service department. I wanted to share a quick screenshot of what Trust BlackLine, the site. It actually looks like this. And within it, it'll give you the current status of the system, the status history, some of the web requests, and the response times that are going on. And you'll see to the right of that Trust, there's the security of the BlackLine. There's the Learn, which is the educational part, and then the calendar of some of the updates that are going to happen within BlackLine. Now, wanted to wrap up this segment of next steps. So we talked a lot about local business and admin roles, and really embrace your role as a leader when it comes to some of these best practices and topics within your organization. And set up meetings with management to make sure you're incorporating their thoughts of what needs to be addressed. And lastly, I want to make sure that for those of you who are with us today, please join our BlackLine tactics and best practices. More importantly, I'll share with you why. We have a video that our firm created related to the BlackLine matching module, and it's the match set best practices. When I took the course, and I am certified in the matching module, I felt like certain parts of the matching process were tedious, and I thought, man, if I had to redo this all over again from scratch, it would just take me a lot of time. We actually created a Word document with a table of contents, so you just, then the table of contents has a hyperlink, and it hyperlinks to the different match set pass rules that you should consider to get the highest probable matching, auto matching, if you do decide to use the matching module. So we created a template that shows screenshots, etc. But this is a quick video that we created, and I share this because The LinkedIn group that I just shared in the prior slide is where you're going to find videos like that, and here's the hyperlink to that group. Lastly, I wanted to make sure that some of you might feel this is a great catalyst to new ideas for 2017. I offer a couple of advanced meetings for existing BlackLine customers, but for those of you who are with us today, I wanted to really provide you an opportunity to see what other modules might make sense for your organization with me personally. So we're limiting we call it an ROI assessment. It basically encompasses a process review. We go through the products that you currently have, and also, more importantly, the products that you're thinking about, and figuring out whether or not it actually makes sense for your organization to evaluate the implementation of that particular product. So it could be variants, it could be intercompany hub, it could be a lot of other products. You can reach us at info@avivaspectrum.com, and I'm limiting it to only 5 live participants in this webinar. All I ask is that the subject header of this says ROI assessment, so I know it's from this webinar, and more importantly, it's from the live people with me today. And with that, we're going to open it up to some questions, and I hope that we all get to get connected via LinkedIn. You can find us under Quintin Dykes, and then obviously Sonia Luna, and we'll leave that with some Q&A. So the Q&A box is now open, so we'd love to hear from you now.
Sonia, just wrapping up, Sonia on the last couple of pages talked about, training opportunities for matching efficiency, talked about, an assessment for, the potential returns. That's really powerful, and that's why I like working with Sonia's team, is they are just masters at that. So I would really, recommend if there's some opportunities just for some conversations to engage with her team on that. I think it's going to provide a lot of value for your organization.
Thanks, Quintin. Hey, we got a question here from a participant, and says, can you recommend a specific report or tool that supports the trend reports?
Sure. Many folks have functionality in BlackLine called enhanced reports. I think more companies have enhanced reports than actually are using them. So I would recommend you look at enhanced reports. But from over our 85 standard reports, I would recommend you look at the user control report. That has a lot of certification history on that. Then we also have a couple reconciliation control reports. What they would do is they would give you, how many groups you have within your account reconciliation population. And then, the other reports are going to be the R item reports and the T item reports within the standard, 85 reports. So it's going to be a combination of, going through the different reports and looking through that. I tell you what I can do. I'll send Sonia a list of our 85. It's a matrix summary of all of the 85 plus standard reports. And then if you want to have access to that, go ahead and engage with Sonia, and she can send that out to you. And then you can go through that list and then sort of compare to the trend report information, and you can start building it that way. So I think that'd be a nice way to start on this process. And then you can contact us for questions, as you need.
Great. And the best way to connect, really, honestly, is through that LinkedIn connection for me. It's easy to connect with me there. Thank you for offering that, Quintin. That's a lot of help. And I think the just to summarize the answer, there's not one report within BlackLine to get to that total trend, and also each organization is going to find different information to be more valuable versus others. So, that list that Quintin was mentioning, going through that and finding, let's say, your top 3, your top 5, etc. That's going to be kind of the main meat of those meetings that you're going to have with management. So we'll leave it open for one more minute for any additional questions in the Q&A box for those of you out there today with us. And lastly, I'll mention, as I'm waiting on additional questions, Aviva Spectrum does have a YouTube channel, and I already mentioned some of the videos that we've created. One of them was the introduction to a template on the match set details. But we published some frequently asked questions. We created some videos discussing implementation, typical questions, and how to really evaluate implementation partners, those sorts of frequently asked questions related to BlackLine. So you can take a look at our YouTube channel as well as BlackLine's YouTube channel. They have a lot of great product overview videos that give you kind of a sense whether or not something might be a good fit for your organization. And the last question that we have, Quintin, right now is, have you seen any companies use the amortization automation for fixed assets? I think that.
Yeah, that's really nice. If many times it's the smaller companies who maybe they're on QuickBooks or something where their ERP doesn't support sort of the, fixed asset depreciation calculations, where they can use the amortization, the template to actually create the depreciation schedules. So I have seen that, and it seems to me be some smaller organizations that maybe their businesses are outgrowing their ERP, but it will work for a while. So yeah, I encourage you to sort of look into that if that's going to be a need. It's going to be much more efficient than doing the calculations in Excel, manually, and then posting a journal entry, based on an Excel calculation. So lots of opportunities for efficiency when we start talking about that very specific piece.
Excellent advice. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on the Best Practice webinar